And we're on a brave new world. Don't you dare close your eyes. Nobody? No one's everyone's going to leave me hanging like this. Yeah. So. Yep. Vlog this week is actually all online, so I'm not printing out anything for you. It is a letter from Cortez to King Charles V of Spain. So that's the one. Yeah. And the question, you got it. There's a little question right in that midsection. 5 sentences. Again, that's how I'm grading these things, guys. Just did you answer the 5 sentences, 2 points apiece. If you get the entire question wrong, you have 5 sentences, you still get credit for it. The only thing I ask is not like, bloopity blop bleep blow. I like candy canes. Yum, 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 yum. That has nothing to do with the thing. Unicorn icing. Anytime I say anything unicorn, I always think of Meet the Robinsons. Hey, nice trapper keeper. You want to come to my house, Coop? Everyone hated me. Anyways, that's not funny. Spanish settlers, right? That's pretty baller. It was the Spanish that were doing stuff. And, all kinds of things. Yeah, that was pretty funny. I'll tell you about that. Somebody like last second period we were talking about the 2 G's, gold and God, and I was like, the Spanish were looking for gold and what else? They're about girls. It's like, yes, they were cruising for chicks. They were running around, and because the Spanish advantage they had was guns, so they were running around with these chicks and going, "I got your tickets. You want to go where? To the gun show?"
That's what my dad does.
Nice. That's ridiculous. Firepower. I don't need firepower without these guns. Anyway, that's a thing. That's definitely a thing that just happened there. Right. So from there we go to Christopher Columbus, I guess, and some stuff. All right, back to it. So the Spanish settlers are going to settle in this new world. And that's kind of the 3 waves if you think about it. First, we start with exploration. Hello! And on we go. That would be your Christopher Columbus. Second stage is, we will take you over. Steal everything. That would be your Hernan Cortez. Phase 3 is, and now we're going to live here. Okay? And that's going to present all kinds of interesting conundrums. Just think about this for just a second. How many of you guys would be all for where I was like, hey guys, we are going to go live on the moon.
I don't.
Some people would be like, that's really cool. But, seriously, it's like after like a week of just like being in a bubble and being all like, support. There's nothing there. It's the freaking moon. The same sort of methodology was seen by the Europeans. Okay, you're going to go live in the colony. So guess what's there? Well, there's a church. Anything else? No? That sounds terrible. No, thank you. Really, the only reason people go there is like, and you can make a ton of money. Well, that sounds pretty awesome. Because the fact is you've got a kind of a strange middle class of people who are technically nobles, but they really don't have any land or wealth or anything. They're just kind of rich in name, not so much in actuality. So this gives them an opportunity, hey, go be a governor here, go live here, you'll get free land, and you just administer it for the crown, everything will be great. So basically, you have these people taking their families out to what's known as the frontier to try to start building up a life. Now here's the other thing, is these colonies were not made for the purpose of people's comforts in mind. Because what's the purpose of a colony? What are the Spanish looking for? For gold. That's right, they're cruising for chicks. That's right. Although you're actually more right than you know, because in truth, most of these Spanish are going to be men. Because they're soldiers and sailors, and that's men's profession. Yes, some women snuck into doing that job, but they weren't allowed to do it unless they dressed like boys. So, this was something that did happen, but it was very rare.
Wasn't that in China too, because of the law?
That's a whole other story. Although it is on Netflix now, but
Is it really?
yeah, it is. But no, that story is actually like the actual story of Mulan is far more interesting because like
It's all true. Except,
it's a legend.
Is it also like a love story?
No, not at all.
The teacher told me it was true. Really long.
Well, it's fake. Did it actually happen? I don't know. It's a legend in
There's a
Chinese.
lot of history in the
Oh, well, yeah. It's dubious at best. I mean, it's not a really great historical movie. It's Disney. What do you expect? But I mean, it is fun, but it's not. That's fine. It's what it is. You know. But the thing is that, like with Mulan, she actually fought this whole campaign. They never found out she was a chick. You know, I always people she was doing her thing. Everything was great. And then what happens is later, after she served the Empire well, things like that, her war buddies go like, hey, where's this, guy, hi, things like that. And there's this, lady like, hey, it's me. Oh. And they're feeling all awkward because, it's guys being guys. And, there's not a lot of privacy in there. But anyways, back to my original point is you did have some European women come to the colonies, but generally they were part of the family already, or they were maybe someone's daughter who would marry another European. So this creates this class system of those who are European, which are at the top called Peninsulares, and if you have a child that is born in the New World, they are ethnically European, they're no different than their parents, but technically they're considered different because they weren't born in Spain, so they're called Creoles. Now, as we established, these numbers were very heavy men, as in, if you were a young white lady in this town, you would have maybe 600 white men to choose from as a spouse. There's a lot of competition, let's put it that way. So, anyway, they were cruising for chicks. Specifically, they would often marry either natives or African Americans coming over from the transatlantic slave trade, and that created mixed race classes of mestizos, which are Spanish and Native American, and mulattoes, who are mixed of African and European. And at the very bottom, you have Native Americans and African Americans. So this is kind of where this hierarchy comes from. Does that kind of make sense? So, but they were searching for gold. And specifically, they want to ship this back to Spain, gold and silver. And this is the purpose of the colony, is to take raw materials and feed them to the mother country. It's almost acting like a parasitic relationship. You're taking stuff and shipping it back. So, to control these territories, we have to establish the audiencias and appoint viceroys. Now, what this means, a viceroy is a governor, essentially. Think about it this way. How far away is Spain from Mexico? 3,000 miles. It takes about 6 months to get there. Right?
It takes how long to go?
Not nowadays, no. In truth, it may actually be 3 months. I'm starting to question that 6 months thing. But actually, I think it is 3 months. So, if this is the case, how well can the king rule? If you're finding out about problems 3 months later, and you're responding, it's going to be another 3 months. You're kind of half a year behind the current problems. You can't really effectively do that, can you? So, what do you do instead? You appoint somebody else who you trust. Hey, you rule in my name. You go move there. And this will make you basically like a king for all intents and purposes, but you're answerable to me. So, you screw up, I'm going to fire you, that sort of thing. That's what a viceroy is. It's sort of like an acting king. Runs the colony, runs everything in the name of the king. The audiencias was a council made up of various landowning nobles who would sort of like advise the viceroy to the local problems and try to kind of give them good knowledge of what's going on, what problems need to be solved, that sort of thing. So really, automatically, we have the colonies basically ruling themselves. And this is going to contribute rather mightily to the indignation that the American colonists have when the British start levying taxes, being like, boy, we're ruling ourselves, what do we need you for? So this is kind of, going into this whole revolution thing. So the other thing we have to understand is that the culture of Europe is going to need to be spread to control people. The first thing about imperialism is that it is the domination of not only the political life, but the cultural and economic life of another group of people. So what we got to do is make them effectively part of our system. And the agent that most does that is the Catholic Church, specifically through the Spanish missions. Spanish missions were basically like outposts. They were independent out there in the wilderness where they would interact with natives and teach them Spanish and faith. And they would start kind of instructing them in the culture. In many of these places, you actually weren't allowed to speak your native language. You weren't allowed to practice your native culture. You were supposed to dress like the Europeans. And dress plays a major role in making people part of the society. Think about that. Why do we have a uniform in this school? Why do we have a uniform? So you have to play. As I say, you have to try it. Yes, we were really concerned about people having to worry so much about what they were wearing, agonizing for hours in front of the mirror. Yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of part of it. That's all the good side effects of it. But it's also to make you part of something. You know what I mean? If everyone dresses the same, they are part of a group. You can easily identify everybody. If you are president, you are wearing the uniform, etc., etc. Yes. So this does two things. One, it makes us feel like we're part of a group because we all look the same. But also it starts to change our mindset of, hey, we're all together into this, and starts to kind of make us seem part of one group set of ideals, things like that. So it's as much about being part of a culture as anything else. This is the same sort of thing that they're going to be doing by making the natives dress like Europeans. You are going to make them more like us. You know what I mean? Now, the clergy saw this as a good thing because you're getting rid of your barbaric customs and being more civilized. But in truth, this often didn't really work because how similar were the climates between Europe and Caribbean? Not the same at all. So you can imagine wearing wool and heavy clothing, things like that, like you would for a European winter, would probably be a little toasty in the Caribbean. So this is kind of a different setup. This is a Spanish mission, FYI. And again, they basically had to survive out there on their own. If you look at the architecture of it, it basically looks a bit like you would think like a cathedral, same sort of like Notre Dame, but the same token, it's a lot more austere. And in addition, it's got these kind of almost crenellations about it, because they also had to act as a fortress in some cases. So we're talking about these were in an area of town that weren't necessarily the nicest. All right, so in these colonies, raw materials are going to be sent to Spain. Again, that's the purpose of a colony. We're sending stuff back for the purpose of development. What are the goods we're sending back? Well, obviously, silver and gold, but also cash crops, which the Europeans are starting to buy up. Tobacco, for instance. Smoking is going to become a very popular pastime amongst all of the sexes, and it's actually going to be exported all around the world. In addition, we have the cash crop of sugar. Sugar is very labor intensive to make, but the end result is something that is incredibly lucrative. You're going to make a ton of money doing it, and you can make all sorts of other wonderful side products of it. Candy was not something that was widely experienced by people in the world at this time. Sugar was too expensive. That's going to have to take some changes, and it does by the 1900s. You have a significant difference and significant changes in the way that we can produce these goods. And this is where you start to have like some of the major candy corporations start coming out, also with manufacturing. Because before that, it had to be made by hand, and it was absolutely delicious, but also fairly labor intensive. But also we can make rum out of sugar cane. And rum is actually going to power the militaries of the world. That's one thing I think that's kind of wild. I don't know if you think about that. Military rations, the type of food that they got. One of the things that was required for them was booze. You always fed your troops, and you gave them alcohol as well. Again, partially to deal with the water problems, but also because if they're a little bit tipsy, they're probably not going to be complaining too much about their problems, but not too much. We don't want them drunk. So Rome is actually going to be utilized by the military as much as anything else. And then the encomienda system. Can someone tell me what was the encomienda system, or encomienda? Again from yesterday. Yes, ma'am.
Where native farm ranch and mine for Spanish language.
Sure. Last name? That's exactly what it is. And basically it's slavery. That's what it comes right down to. You're forcing people to work for you, and they are having to do so without recompense. You're not paying them, things like that. And this was seen as rather wrong by the priests especially. You see Father Hidalgo ends up protesting it. And in the 1540s, the encomienda system is overturned. But for now, it's going to be an important aspect of keeping the plantations running, because you need a lot of labor to do a lot of these things. Everything from the production of sugar to the mining of gold. So the encomienda system provides that. Well, once we have the end of the encomienda system, and especially because the problems involving diseases and involving overwork, we have a significant number of the native population dying. So we are going to replace that with workers from where? Think about it. If you look at our class structure, you can probably figure it out. Once the natives start dying off, we turn to this begins the transatlantic slave trade. Because one of the things we'll see is that the Europeans are able to sell products that are coming basically from the New World into Africa and use that to buy slaves and kind of create this triangle trade. Poseidon, god of the Brocian.
Oh my god. What does?
That was the thing.
Yeah. Have you put in the police corrections for the next one?
I mentioned that, and I'll be getting on that pretty soon. I have no idea what that's there. Anyways. So it said, Bartolomé Casas and some other priests are going to condemn the encomienda system. In 1542, it's overturned and banned. Despite this, the king's sort of 3,000 miles away, so the colonists need this labor. It basically is a law that they do not enforce. That in and of itself is kind of an interesting thing. For instance, you guys are probably aware of the fact that someday you might need to serve jury duty, yes?
Mm-hmm.
And some people really dislike that because it does disrupt your life, but it's kind of a neat thing because you actually will sit on a case and effectively participate in enforcing the law, you know? But here's the thing is, what happens if someone is irrevocably guilty, like you know they're totally guilty, but you think that the circumstances were justified? What do you do in that situation? Well, depending on the crime, some crimes have a minimum sentence that must be passed, other crimes don't. So you can find somebody guilty, but say, yeah, we're not going to punish you at all. Yeah?
What's the difference between manslaughter?
That's an interesting question. Manslaughter is often unintentional. For instance, let's say that you are working on a house with a partner and you're setting up this beam and it falls and it cracks in the skull and kills him. You could theoretically be charged with manslaughter because while you didn't intend to kill the dude, maybe you weren't as safe as you could have been, you were negligent. Okay? And there's also different degrees of murder. Like, for instance, did you plan on killing this guy? Was it premeditated? You had all these plans? Or was it just sort of like an act of find someone cheating on your spouse and kill the guy or something like that? So there's different layers to it as well. That's really one main difference. Not a lawyer though. Yeah. funny thing, a friend of mine actually went to law school, and he actually is a bar, and he can act as a lawyer, but he doesn't. He owns a business instead. So often, like when we talk about the law or something like that, he'll say something, be like, "But I'm not a lawyer," because it's like I'm not your lawyer. I'm not handling this nonsense. It's just my opinion. So it's kind of funny. But, we teach them about it. Yeah.
If you like don't have like a law degree,
Yeah.
you can still like be a clerk. Don't you? You can like defend yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't have to have like a law degree and like you're someone else.
Well, I don't think you can represent somebody else if you don't have a lawyer, because there are rules about that. I don't know the particularities to them because that's what the bar decides. But I don't think you're supposed to do that. That's where the whole thing of I'm not a lawyer. It's like I don't want to get in trouble with that as well. But yeah, you can absolutely defend yourself. It's usually not a very good idea. Because I mean, some people I know have done it successfully for like small things, like I'm buying this property and I don't want to hire a lawyer to look over everything, so I'm just going to kind of wing it. But like if you're like on trial and it's all this stuff, like that's a whole lot of work. Because I mean, there's all kinds of files here. I mean, think about how bad it was just getting folks to sign up their blogs, and have everything on time. Imagine that, but like if you don't do this, you go to jail. So just kind of paperwork and things like that. Well, I have a couple of friends who are lawyers and folks and family who are lawyers, and that's the thing. It says like 90% of the job is paperwork. But like that sounds like a hellish existence to me because I hate paperwork. Yeah.
So I went to these soccer fields in Lexington, and it's right by a women's prison. They like in like movies you see them like throwing rocks and like doing all this heavy labor. Is that what they?
That's very like Victoria, because I don't know if you're supposed to you're charged with prison with heavy labor. That's what that is. Heavy labor. They do have certain jobs that they'll have like prisoners do. Well, there's that, yes, but also things like outside of the building, like business charities, for instance. The cleaning the schools and things like that. It's something that they can do, and they get paid to do it. And yeah, they're doing a job. They don't get paid much, but I mean, it is something. And what's that? There's prison shops and things like that, so you can buy like exactly.
Pretty not strict place.
Oh no, it's not quite that. It's not quite as simple as that. Like
It's scary looking. I have pictures of it on my phone.
Like the thing that we don't often realize with prison is that there's a level of control that is just unimaginable, and like they take away all of your rights. That's the point of prison. So for instance, the idea that you don't get to decide what your schedule is. You wake up when they tell you to wake up. You come and do this when they tell you to do this. You follow this line. Everything is exactly strictly controlled. Trying to reemphasize that you follow the rules. This is what you do. That's kind of like what it is. It's retraining in a lot of ways. And people who can't follow that will often do things like solitary confinement, which is all manner of different stuff. Because I mean, like solitary confinement, they lock you away for 18 months minimum, and there's no interaction with anybody ever. Like people go crazy doing that, so it's pretty wild. There's a fine documentary that's on Netflix. We're watching it, Sociology. That's nice. It's interesting stuff. Yeah, it's interesting stuff because I mean, again, it's all done in a sociological, psychological way to get a certain aspect of behavior changed. But no, it's not so much on the breaking rocks aspect of stuff. Again, that's because there's been a big change in the way that prisons are run. The idea back in the 1900s started to shift from let's punish criminals and like make them pay for what they did to let's change the behavior of why if they're on drugs, get them rehab, and this and this and what have you. Yeah.
My dad will go to like the prison to like sell people and stuff to them, and he says like when he walks in, like because he goes like once a year, he says that like he's so glad that he never has to go there.
Yeah, it's not like people say it's like a cushy, palace is where they go and they get TV things, but that's like, no, that's not what it's like. I mean, you can see it on, like, seriously, there's so many, like, documentaries on Netflix about prison. You can see that it's not a pleasant place.
I just
Yeah.
want to like go in. They say that like when you go into prison for like drugs or something, and they like try to make you test, they like will give you other drugs to try and make you become addicted to those instead of.
It depends on the drug. Yeah, like methadone, for instance, is one of those. There's a methadone clinic next to our house, just a little ways away, and we're not there. So I mean, yeah, it's any addiction. It's that's this is all. This is way getting into sociology, by the way. But addiction is one of these things that we don't often really get, you know, because we'll use it in light all the time. Like, I'm so addicted to whatever candy or whatever, you know. Like I've heard people say I'm addicted to Mountain Dew. No, you're not. Because addiction means you cannot function without it. Now, you know, in all seriousness, addiction is one of those really, really scary things because you are not normal without it. Like, that's the level of addiction. Like, for instance, Sarah's uncle is an alcoholic, and he actually works for the AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, stopping people and things like that. And one of the things he talks about is he was not, you think, like a typical, like, drunk, like, you know, always down on his luck, things like that. He was what you call a high-functioning alcoholic. So, like, he was the type of guy who would go down a 12-pack of beer, go run a marathon, and go finish off a keg. Like, he's the type of guy who just, like, was constantly drinking all the time, just made him normal. That's the baseline of addiction, you know, is you have to take this or else you have physiological responses. You know, if you don't have alcohol when you're addicted to it, you start to have sweats, your heart rate starts changing. You can actually die from withdrawal, you know, things like that. So it's a lot more than just I really want this. It's you have to have it or else you will suffer the consequences. Yeah.
What about like babies that are like born addicted to drugs, like because they're like parents with them while they were like and they like come out and they're like shaking, and they put them and they like die sometimes.
Yeah.
And they like how do you like get them off of that drug?
Same way. Take them on another drug similar and satisfies that, ease them off. It's rough, yeah.
Oh.
Anyways, back to something that has to do with history. That was a nice little sidetrack. There we go. But this is the transatlantic slave trade. And this is totally the recorded one, too, so, you know. Those following at home can go ahead and skip to this point. But, anyways, the transatlantic slave trade, as you'll notice, each slave of it had a specific goal. For instance, the Europeans, what are they making? They're making manufactured goods, things like textiles and rum and firearms, stuff like that. What do they need to make that stuff? They need the raw materials, sugar, tobacco, cotton, etc. Okay? Well, all of these goods require a lot of labor needed to grow them, what have you. So they need slaves. So that goes back to Africa. What do the Africans want? Well, they've got all these people, and they're trading them for textiles, rum, and manufactured goods that are coming from Europe. Each slave has to say, let's talk people. Let's go on with that. Well, here's the things. First of all, we understand the concept of war is very different from a tribal society versus, say, a Western civilization. In a tribal society, every single person that's fighting is part of your family, okay? So that means that you're not going to commit to a battle like a European general will, because a European general sees that, well, to win this battle, I'm going to have so many casualties. You know, I'm expecting, say, like 10% of my troops to be dead by the end of this battle, and that's acceptable if I take the victory. Tribesmen wouldn't see it that way. That's way too high. Maybe 5%. But anything more than that is way too high. So they had a habit of being cowardly. Their reputation is they being cowardly when they're really not. They're just have different goals. You know, in many ways we shouldn't ever say like 10% of people dead. That's fine. So what happens though is in tribal warfare also it's often about exerting control of authority and raiding versus about actually taking over somebody. So what tends to happen is whenever you have to try to find another tribe, you have a lot more people survive. And they are taken as slaves. If you defeat them, they become slaves, just like we saw with the Aztec, that same sort of thing. Well, the slave can then be traded to anybody for anything. And the thing that Europeans have, they really, really want is guns. Because guns give you an advantage in warfare, allow you to take more slaves. So this kind of creates a vicious cycle in Africa. So as they're trading guns for slaves, slaves for guns, etc., and this is kind of exacerbating tribal war, and that's going to have a major effect on Africa later. And then we're going to have this trade. The other major thing is, think about it this way. if you're a slave trader, what physical traits do you want your slaves? You want them to be physically strong. What else? You want them to be smart, right?
Yeah, not too smart.
No, we want them smart. Here's why. We're not worried about them running away because we have a lot of controls to keep slaves from running away. For instance, if a slave runs away, we cut his foot off. Can't run now. Okay. That's it. We have other forms of control. I put it that way. There are stories of bad slaves, but there's all sorts of other controls we can implement. So that actually we want them smart because we can give them more jobs. They can do stuff that like is more complex, like running places, and we actually give them a little bit more privileges and freedoms and things like that. And that keeps them happy because they don't want to sacrifice that. It's all about levels of control. You'll see after the Civil War, this was a major problem, trying to like resettle people who've been slaves their entire life. You know, that's Reconstruction, I think that's all of that. So we have this situation where we have strong, we have smart, we want the healthy, we want the young, we want the best, the brightest, everything they have to offer. And this is going to be taken out of Africa for centuries. So it's got a major economic impact over the history of these various countries and these continents. All right. So as these groups make through this complex hierarchy, which you'll notice over there, the Creoles, Mestizos, Mulattoes, Native Americans, and African Americans. And it's going to create an interesting, unique culture. We talked about this with geography, you might recall, specifically involving the music and the culture of the Caribbean. Specifically how it involves elements from Spain and from Portugal, from the African slaves coming over to the natives who were conquered before, all this blending together to create cultural elements which didn't exist other places. Music is a really interesting thing for that reason. How many of you guys are into music, like in terms of construction of music theory, you know how songs are put together? But one of the things, I guess we'll talk about that later. Guys, have a good day. Tomorrow.